What if a single sentence could silence a president and shift the balance of power in a room full of world leaders? 5 minutes ago an electrifying clash erupted at a summit, where Viktor Orban delivered a line so forceful that cameras stuttered, lights dimmed, and Ilham Aliyev was forced into sudden silence. What was said? What made the Azerbaijani leader freeze? Stay until the end, the answer will shock you. Summary of the opening: the summit began with a thunderquiet moment, and Orban entered unlike any other politician. His steps were deliberate, heavy with the weight of countless storms. No flashbulbs chased him, the room itself drew him in, like iron shavings to an unseen magnet. He was not tall, yet his gait resembled an ancient rock, unshaken by relentless waves. He wore a matte, dark suit that whispered of gravity rather than luxury. A deep blue tie caught the eye without shouting. His face was broad, his jaw carved by years, not by wrinkles but by experience. A slightly furrowed brow hinted at thoughts that outlasted the moment, while his gray eyes lay calm as a wind-still lake. He sank into his chair slowly, the cushion gave, yet his posture remained firm. Every word he might utter felt as solid as stone. In his silence lay more confidence than in the longest speeches. Summary of Orban's presence: across the table, Aliyev already claimed his space, his posture that of a man accustomed to power and reluctant to yield. Aliyev's attire was darker than the protocol norm, the cut emphasizing his elongated silhouette. His facial features were sharp, chiseled from stone, revealing no unnecessary emotion, though his eyes flickered with tension. A hunter's focus lingered, waiting for the precise moment to strike. Between them, a dry nod replaced any warm greeting, more a chess opening than a handshake. The hall breathed protocol, light-colored wood panels, muted lights, a long table's straight lines. Cameras glided over faces, ready to capture not merely words but collisions. Aliyev began softly, building his speech like stone arches, one support after another, crowned by a keystone. He spoke of Azerbaijan's independence, of memories, of the Soviet legacy that left schools, factories, and a lingering sense of captivity. The word occupation slipped out quietly, landing on the table like a sharp knife awaiting a hand. Orban tilted his head, studying the lamp's shadows on the surface. His lips twitched ever so slightly, forming a surgeon's smile, calm, detached, ready to cut. The room hushed further. Someone adjusted a microphone, another pretended to shuffle papers. All eyes waited, because Orban had to answer. "Mr. President," he began, his voice low, resonant with the habit of speaking for substance, not spectacle. "When you label the Soviet Union an occupier, you forget it built the foundation of today's Azerbaijan." He spoke of stone-like words, of bridges laid by Soviet roads, universities, and oil fields that turned Baku into a monumental heart. "I do not glorify the past. Hungary, too, once rose against Moscow, a dark chapter that brought defeat and pain. We paid the price, and I own that mistake." Summary of Orban's rebuttal: the hall sensed the weight of history. Each pause louder than a roar. He leaned forward, palms resting on the table, his pause more eloquent than dozens of sentences. "Consider this: without the Soviet-built infrastructure, could you command the power, the flag, the state you possess now?" he asked, eyes scanning the room like grass seeking sunlight. "Your nation's modern face, oil rigs, universities, was forged in those years." Aliyev's fingers tightened on the armrest, his resolve trembling. He opened, "Mr. Orban, the Soviet era brought schools and factories, but at what cost? Our resources fed strangers, our people lived below what they deserved. Was that not dependence?" The silence after his words thickened, the air heavy with unspoken consequences. Orban reclined, his expression unchanged, knowing the duel had only begun. "You are right, President. Decisions were made far from Baku, and they burdened you. Yet without that very power, Azerbaijan might never have emerged independent in the 1990s. He let his gaze linger, a quiet warning. Gratitude for history prevents the ruin of the future. The room fell still, cameras capturing a tableau of tension, each breath a reminder that diplomacy can feel like a blade's edge, ready to cut or to heal. The story ends here, but the reverberations will echo long after the lights dim. What will happen next in this high-stakes chess game of nations? The answer remains uncertain, waiting for the next move. 5 minutes ago, the world was rocked by a stunning revelation. Viktor Orban, at a summit witnessed by countless eyes, delivered a tirade that put Ilham Aliyev in his place. His words resounded with such gravity that the hall fell into an unnerving silence, with cameras struggling to capture the tension in the air. What exactly did Orban say that silenced Aliyev? Stick around, as the unfolding drama will leave you speechless. Orban stepped into the room with a deliberate calmness, a stark contrast to the typical entrance of most politicians. His pace was slow, but an invisible weight accompanied his presence. It was the poise of a man who has navigated storms and no longer craves the spotlight. Attention gravitated toward him as if pulled by an unseen force. His stature, though not imposing, carried the steadfastness of ancient rock, eroded yet unyielding. Dressed in dark, understated fabric that bespoke seriousness rather than extravagance, his dark blue tie captured interest without shouting for it. The strong line of his jaw was heavy with life experience, not merely age, while his furrowed brow suggested contemplation that went deeper than the occasion required. His gray eyes remained serene, reminiscent of a still lake, even as the gathered audience buzzed with anticipation. Sitting down, he commanded the chair not as a politician, but as someone whose every word would echo with significance. In contrast, Aliyev, already in position, exuded the air of authority. He occupied his space with the confidence of a leader who understood power and seldom yielded. Clad in a deeper suit, one tailored to accentuate his sharp physique, his features were as chiseled as marble, revealing nothing extraneous. Yet, his eyes betrayed a simmering intensity, a hunter poised for the opportune moment. Their greeting was devoid of warmth, a mere nod, marking not an introduction, but the commencement of a chess match. The room, alive with the presence of global leaders, exuded an air of protocol. Lightwood paneling, dimmed overhead lights, and the straight lines of a long table lent a sense of rigidity. Cameras glided over faces that knew too well what was at stake. It was not just a conversation today but a clash of ideologies. The exchange began gently, yet the undertones promised a tempest. Aliyev spoke confidently, constructing his narrative like stone arches, a foundation here, a support there, and capped with a keystone. He waxed eloquent about Azerbaijan's independence, reminiscing about the legacies of the Soviet Union, schools, factories, and an underlying anxiety about freedom. His mention of occupation landed softly but sharply, akin to a knife that dared someone to grasp it. Orban, studying the shadows cast by the overhead lamp, tilted his head thoughtfully. His expression remained stoic, lips curling into a knowing smirk. It was a smile devoid of pleasure or agreement, rather, it was the smile of a surgeon poised to make a decisive incision, fully aware that deeper truths awaited just beneath the surface. An uneasy quietness enveloped the room as the audience held its collective breath. The sound of a microphone adjustment or the shuffle of paper only added to the tension. They awaited Orban's response, and when it came, it was steady and commanding. "Mr. President," he began, his voice resonating with the weight of hard-won insights. "When you label the Soviet Union as an occupier, you overlook the fact that it was the very foundation upon which the contemporary Republic of Azerbaijan stands. My voice is not raised, it carries a steady pound like stones laid on a cobbled road." Orban continued, "I don't romanticize the past. Hungary has its own tragic chapters. We, too, once rose against Moscow, and with that, he drew the focus back to the deeper historical realities, setting the stage for a confrontation that would challenge not just their perspectives but history itself. Previously, Orban reminded the hall that the Soviet Union laid the concrete foundation of today's Azerbaijani state. He spoke calmly, his words settling like stone slabs on a road, refusing any melodramatic crescendo. He admitted Hungary, too, once rose against Moscow, only to stumble into darkness. What if the power you condemn turned out to be the very engine that built your country's wealth, oil fields, and schools? The question hung in the air, electric, as the spotlight swept across the tense faces. A sudden hush fell, the scent of polished wood mingling with the faint perfume of old leather chairs. The audience felt each breath as a shared secret. Orban's voice cut through the silence. I will be honest, he began, each syllable deliberate, that period was one of the darkest chapters in our memory. He confessed the path they chose led to defeat and pain. It was a mistake, he said, and we paid for it. A pause stretched, heavy, like a rope pulling every gaze toward him, grass reaching for sunlight. He turned his eyes to Aliyev. You speak of occupation, Orban continued. But consider the roads, the universities, the factories the Union erected. Without them, would Baku still pulse as the oil heart of a great nation? Would your flag even exist today? He leaned forward, his fingers resting on the table, the wood warm under his palms. Nothing appears from void, all is born of collective toil. Aliyev's knuckles tightened around the armrest. He wanted to retort, but Orban's cadence left no room for interruption. Gratitude for the past is not weakness, Orban declared. It is strength. Those who forget the aid they received cling to an illusion of independence, an illusion that eventually shatters. He glanced at neighboring states that had turned their backs on Russia, now drowning in crisis. Their suffering is the price of that choice, he warned, each word slicing the still air, leaving a lingering trace. Germany, he added, built its might on cooperation with Russia for decades. When gas and trade flowed freely, its economy thrived. Now watch the ruin that follows the severed bond, he said, a crisis that will scar generations. A soft rustle echoed as someone adjusted a microphone. The room seemed to tighten, the silence thickening like fog. Mr. Aliyev, you still have time to reflect, Orban lifted a hand, not as an adversary but as a seasoned traveler offering counsel. Think of the millions of Azerbaijanis working in Russia, the living bridge between our peoples. To break that bridge is to cut your own future. His words floated, heavy, demanding contemplation. Aliyev stared, his gaze hardening yet flickering with doubt. He felt the weight of facts pressing like stones against a wall. Arguing is hard, he thought, the truth lies in every sentence. His fingers clenched again, a silent storm gathering. The hall held its breath, cameras capturing every micro-movement, the faint scent of ink and polished metal in the air. Orban's final pause lingered longer than any speech, a moment that felt like the calm before an avalanche. Remember, he said softly, ungratefulness to the past paves the road to destruction. The lights dimmed marginally. The audience left in muted anticipation. The story hung in balance, waiting for the next decisive move. Just moments before, Viktor Orban sat quietly, calm yet commanding, fully aware that the real clash was only beginning. Ilham Aliyev, after holding the silence like a fragile shield, ignited a spark deep in his eyes, the kind born when a man chooses to stand firm, even on uncertain ground. Lifting his chin, Aliyev spoke with conviction, Mr. Orban, I respect your view, but you must understand, our Soviet past was not just schools and factories. It was a time when decisions were made far from Baku, when our will was stifled. Yes, infrastructure and education came with it, but at what cost? Our resources fueled others' needs. Our people often lived less than what they deserved. Isn't that a form of dependence? His words cut sharply through the air, yet the hall remained unmoved, no nods, no murmurs. The silence pressed so heavily that even the interpreters faltered, cautious not to disturb the fragile atmosphere. Orban slowly leaned forward, palms resting firmly on the table, his pause speaking louder than any speech. As Aliyev nervously brushed his cuff, Orban broke the quiet, his voice steady and measured, You are right, Mr. President. Decisions weren't always made in Baku. But let's be honest. Without those very decisions, without the force that held this region together throughout the 20th century, could Azerbaijan have stood as an independent nation in the 1990s? He locked eyes with Aliyev. History is harsh. Without that union, your people might have been torn apart by neighbors, dragged into unwanted wars. Yes, there was a price to pay. But that price paved the way for your statehood. Aliyev's brow furrowed slightly, his lips trembled, but Orban continued relentlessly, allowing no interruption. You know, Mr. Aliyev, Hungary faced humiliation too. We rebelled. We challenged Moscow. And do you know what came of it? Tens of thousands of lives lost. Decades of development sacrificed. His voice softened yet held undeniable weight, each word a quiet yet unyielding hammer striking the room's stillness. Could it be that both leaders shared a bitter truth beneath their fierce stances? That the path of rebellion sometimes leads to ruin more than glory? The tension between them thickened, the line between adversary and witness blurred. What secret shadow of history lurks behind their uneasy respect? Could the price of independence be far more complex than either admits? The room waits, breath held, the true battle of words only deepening. Just moments before, tensions rose sharply as Viktor Orban faced Ilham Aliyev at the summit. Orban's calm but piercing words cut through the room's charged silence like a cold wind. His response to Aliyev's sharp mention of occupation was more than a rebuttal, it was a challenge wrapped in history and stark truth. Their dialogue wasn't just political, it was a clash of legacies. Now, Orban leaned forward, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Orban's voice dropped to a near whisper, each syllable carefully measured and heavy like stone settling into place. I look at Europe today, he said, his eyes scanning the room like a storm surveying the land. I see the same mistake repeating. Countries that once thrived through cooperation with Russia now find themselves swallowed by crisis. He paused, a silence so profound it roared louder than any speech made before. Take Germany, he continued quietly. For decades, its strength was built on steady ties with Russia. When energy and trade flowed freely, its economy was Europe's engine. Now, after severing those bonds, its industries are crumbling. This is no coincidence. It's the law of cause and effect. His words hung suspended, sharp and undeniable. The room seemed to hold its breath. You call the past occupation. Orban tilted his head slightly, eyes locking onto Aliyev's. But strip away everything built within the Soviet Union, what remains? Your presidential seat? Your cities? Your universities and the education many received in Moscow? These legacies you cannot, and will not, renounce because that would be impossible. Aliyev's hands clenched tightly, interlacing fingers like a fortress ready to defend. He opened his mouth to respond, but the shadow of doubt flickered behind his stern gaze. Each counter-argument he held felt like a stone thrown against an unshakable wall. Orban reclined slowly, confident and unhurried. You may dispute these facts, seek excuses. But history does not ask for your explanations. It simply reminds us that ingratitude toward the past paves a path to destroying the future. A hush fell upon the hall, so deep it stilled even the clicking shutters of nearby cameras. His words seemed to linger in the air, transforming a simple exchange into a lesson that none there could easily forget. With the calm patience of a scholar leafing silently through old pages, Orban's tone grew sharper, more precise. Mr. President, you know this better than I do. Without the Soviet era, Baku would not be what it is today. It was during that time that the largest oil reserves were developed. The city's identity, the industrial, modern face it wears, was forged then. During the Great Patriotic War, Baku's oil-fueled tanks and aircraft. More than half the fuel on the front lines came from here. Without it, victory would have been impossible. The room was frozen. Some lowered their eyes to notebooks, but few wrote, as if the words carved themselves into memory without ink. The past was no mere backdrop in this confrontation. It was center stage, a battlefield of pain, pride, and undeniable truths. Would the conversation shift from this raw confession, or would the echoes of history drown out hope for a different future? The answer hung silent, for now. Just moments before, Viktor Orban's words struck the summit room like thunder. He challenged Ilham Aliyev in a way nobody expected. What was said that silenced a man so accustomed to command? The tension was almost tangible, the cameras raced to capture every glance, every breath. What followed was more than a political exchange, it was a collision of histories that left the audience breathless. We left off as Orban reminded everyone that without the Soviet era, Baku would not be what it is today. The monumental oil developments were not accidents of time but the backbone of the city's industrial face. During the Great Patriotic War, Baku's oil didn't just fuel vehicles, it powered tanks and planes that fought for victory. Over half the fuel on the front lines came from here. The room fell into stunned silence. Some shifted their eyes to notebooks, yet no words were written. It felt like Orban's statements etched themselves directly into memory, without ink or page. His voice continued, layered with undeniable weight. The Soviet Union didn't just extract oil, it built hospitals that saved lives, universities producing world-class specialists, and schools that opened doors to the future for your children. Can such creation be called occupation? Occupation destroys. Here, the Soviet era constructed. Orban's delivery was slow, deliberate, like hammer strikes on stone. Each word landed with unyielding force, reshaping the room's atmosphere. Look around, he said, spreading his hands across the space. Your cities, your factories, your roads, all from that era. Even the building where you sit as president was built under the Union. If you truly reject that past, then be consistent. Reject everything it gave, but you won't do that, because then nothing remains. The sharpness of his statement made the translators' voices falter. Aliyev pressed his lips tight, his eyes hardened, but an almost involuntary movement sent his hand toward a glass of water. He took a slow sip, as though trying to wash away the bitter truth, but the taste clung. Orban lifted his gaze again, his voice dropping to a whisper with the power of a storm. You call that time one of oppression. I call it one of building. Yes, it was harsh. Yes, decisions were centralized. But it was through that structure your people gained education, professions, culture. That foundation, you cannot erase it. He paused, locking eyes with Aliyev, his tone sharp but calm, and if you speak now of foreign will, remember, without that will there would be no flag, no state of yours. The room grew quieter than a midnight library. The only sound was a chair scraping as an assistant shifted. Aliyev remained silent, his face unreadable, but subtle tension tightened his lips. He knew well, fighting facts was far harder than fighting opinions. What would Aliyev say next, now that Orban had dropped a gauntlet no one dared catch lightly? The silence hung heavy, the start of a battle not for words, but for the very soul of history and identity. In a stunning twist of fate, Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, delivered a powerful rebuttal that left everyone in the conference hall in utter silence. As cameras captured every moment, he boldly confronted Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, challenging his narrative about the Soviet Union. What could Orban possibly say that would bring a seasoned leader like Aliyev to a standstill? As Orban stepped onto the stage, his approach was distinctly different from the usual political flair. His entrance was slow, reminiscent of a man who has weathered many storms. He exuded a quiet yet strong presence that drew the eyes of the audience like metal to a magnet. Clad in a dark, unadorned suit, his serious demeanor was marked by a heavy jawline, revealing years filled with wisdom rather than mere aging. In stark contrast, Aliyev occupied his space with the confidence of someone well-versed in power plays. Dressed in a sharply tailored suit, he wore an expression firmly set in stone, with flickers of tension in his eyes betraying his inner turmoil. The atmosphere in the room was palpable, filled with unspoken tension, as these two leaders prepared to engage in a battle of wits and words. Aliyev launched into his speech about Azerbaijan's hard-won independence, subtly hinting at the pains of past occupation. Yet, Orban's response was calm, his voice resonating with experience. Mr. President, he began, leaning slightly forward, it's vital to acknowledge where we stand today. You speak of occupation as a weight. But have you considered the foundations built in those years? His words hung in the air like suspended smoke, thick with implications. Orban invoked Germany's reliance on Russian resources, contrasting it with the crises that arose when nations withdrew from such partnerships. You must understand, he continued, gazing directly into Aliyev's eyes, the bond with Russia is not just a relic of the past. It is a lifeline. Your citizens in Russia are not just numbers. They are families, creating ties between us. Aliyev's brows furrowed, caught between his pride and the truth being laid out before him. There was a heaviness in his gaze, a mix of irritation and realization. Would he risk alienating his own people for the sake of false bravado? The silence deepened, holding on to the gravity of Orban's words as if waiting for the next inevitable blow, a moment of reckoning for both leaders. Orban's intensity escalated. If you deny your past and the reality it created, you put your people's future in jeopardy. The hall felt electric, each breath and whisper reverberating against the walls of tension. Aliyev clenched his hands in his lap, sensing the severity of his situation. Orban was not merely challenging him, he was warning him, and the ramifications of this dialogue loomed larger than either man might have anticipated. With each word, the stakes grew higher. Would Aliyev acknowledge these truths, or would pride drive a wedge between their futures? The audience held their breath in anticipation, knowing something pivotal was unfolding before their very eyes. In an electrifying clash between two political titans, Viktor Orban and Ilham Aliyev faced off at a summit that would go down in history. Tension crackled in the air as Orban's voice pierced through the charged atmosphere, addressing Aliyev not as an adversary, but as a fellow traveler who had witnessed the heavy cost of mistakes. Think of the millions of your citizens working in Russia, he urged. They feed their families and build bridges between our nations. To sever these connections would strike not at the Kremlin but at your own people. It would be a betrayal, not just a policy shift. The room froze, the quiet almost palpable, as if even the cameras held their breath. Orban straightened, his resolve palpable. I am not here to play the enemy or the teacher, he continued. I share this as someone who understands the burden of error and the decades it takes to atone for it. Don't tread the path of those who forfeited their futures. His words echoed, ringing out like a long, resounding bell that lingered in the stillness. Aliyev remained silent, his gaze tense, his jaw clenched. He realized that to argue now would mean acknowledging defeat, yet his silence bore an oppressive weight, threatening to become acceptance. Orban, calm and collected, emanated a stark confidence that transformed his statements into a verdict rather than mere rhetoric. Aliyev lifted his chin, his expression sharpening like a blade ready to carve through the atmosphere. Mr. Orban, I hear your points, but for my people, that alliance wasn't just about roads and universities, he retorted, his voice low but unwavering. It was a time when our national will was stifled. Our resources were siphoned away for foreign agendas. My people paid an exorbitant price. We must remember the oppression alongside the infrastructure. It is too easy to forget the decisions made in Moscow. His words struck hard, drawing quick glances among the delegates. Aliyev's voice held a steely edge, suggesting he found ground to stand upon. Orban listened, his expression unchanged, though a fleeting shadow of weariness flickered in his eyes, not irritation, but calm determination from a man who had encountered these arguments countless times before. As Aliyev concluded, Orban leaned in slightly. Mr. President, he began softly, you speak of repression? Yes, it existed, nobody denies those errors. Yet you overlook a critical truth. The air thickened with anticipation, ready for the inevitable rebuttal. Would Aliyev rise to this challenge, or would he falter under the weight of history? 5 minutes ago a headline ripped through the world, Viktor Orban, in a single breath, put the Azerbaijani president on the spot, silencing him with a remark that still echoes in the hall. What did Orban say? What forced Aliyev into unnerving stillness? Stay till the end, you won't believe the twist. Earlier, the crowd watched Orban enter not as a photographer-chased star but as a storm-gathering weight. His slow stride felt like granite beneath an old bridge, each step quiet yet undeniable. A dark, heavy suit hid any flash of luxury, a deep blue tie caught the dim light, demanding a glance. His jaw, lined by years of harsh weather, hinted at thoughts that outlasted the moment. He sank into his chair, the leather sighing under his weight, and the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a stone-heavy word. Aliyev sat already, his posture rigid, his suit darker than protocol required, shoulders squared like a hunter ready to strike. He spoke first, his voice building arches of confidence about Azerbaijan's independence, the lingering shadow of Soviet rule, and the word occupation that hung over the table like a thin blade. Orban's lips twitched, a thin smile of a surgeon poised to cut. The lights dimmed, the microphones caught every breath, and a hush fell over the hall. Flashing back, the scene shifted to the 1970s. A young man named Haydar Aliyev climbed the Soviet security ladder, earning medals and influence. He studied in Moscow, at an academy that forged elite diplomats. Those very institutions, the same that Orban now referenced, had equipped Aliyev with the tools of statecraft. Without that system, could you sit here? Orban asked, his tone turning steel-sharp. The question landed like a stone in water, rippling through the room. Papers rustled, translators' pens hovered, and a faint cough punctuated the tension. Orban pressed on, recalling how Baku's oil had fueled Soviet tanks and aircraft, feeding the war effort that turned the tide. More than half of the Red Army's fuel came from those barrels, blood for the battlefield, keeping Europe from a darker fate. His voice steadied, each sentence a measured strike. Your nation's education, your infrastructure, your very sovereignty owe a debt to that era. Aliyev's grip tightened, his fingers a clenched fist, yet his eyes flickered with a dawning realization. The final pause stretched, heavy and deliberate. Orban leaned forward, hands resting on the mahogany, and whispered, "Gratitude lost turns memory into ruin." The camera lenses seemed to inhale, focusing on the tension that crackled like static. As the hall fell silent, a single question lingered in the air, waiting for an answer that could reshape the narrative. Did a single speech ever change the fate of a nation in the space of a few minutes? Imagine a hall suspended in silence, cameras barely catching the tremor of every breath, while two leaders spar with words that could redraw borders. What did Viktor Orban utter that left Ilham Aliyev speechless? Stay until the final line, what follows will shock you. The opening scene placed Viktor Orban on the stage not as a flashing camera politician but as a storm-worn commander. His stride was slow, each footfall echoing like distant thunder. A dark, matte suit clung to his frame, a navy tie pulling the eye without shouting. His face bore the weight of decades, a furrowed brow hinting at thoughts that ran deeper than the room's protocol. He settled into his chair, the leather sighing under his weight, and the air seemed to compress around him. Aliyev entered with the confidence of a ruler accustomed to command. A tighter, almost black suit sculpted his tall silhouette, his jaw set like carved stone. His eyes flickered with the tension of a hunter waiting for the perfect strike. A single, dry nod was the only greeting exchanged, no handshakes, just the opening move of a chess match. The hall, lined with polished wood and muted lighting, hummed with the low murmur of translation booths, each microphone poised to catch the inevitable clash. The dialogue began gently. Aliyev spoke of Azerbaijan's hard-won independence, of the lingering shadow of Soviet occupation, of factories and schools that were gifts paid for in oil and blood. He whispered occupation like a blade. And the word hung over the table like a thin, sharp knife. Orban leaned forward, eyes tracing the lamp's glimmer on the polished surface, his lips barely moving. A faint, almost surgical smile spread, no joy, no agreement, only calculation. He was ready to carve truth from myth. Mr. President, Orban's voice fell low, resonant, each syllable landing like a stone on a still lake. He reminded the assembly that the Soviet Union, for all its faults, laid the foundations upon which modern Azerbaijan rests. He spoke of roads, hospitals, universities, solid walls that still shelter today's citizens. He asked, if the USSR had never built those pillars, would your republic exist at all? The question struck like thunder, and a collective inhale rippled through the crowd. Aliyev's fingers tightened around the armrest, his pulse audible in the hush. He wanted to rebut, yet Orban cut the pause with a calm that seemed to freeze time. Gratitude for the past is not weakness, Orban continued, it is strength. Those who forget the hands that lifted them only cling to an illusion of freedom that crumbles. He painted a picture of neighboring states that turned their backs on Russia and now drown in crisis, citing Germany's collapse after severing energy ties. The hall grew heavier, the scent of heated metal and stale coffee mingling with the tension. A sudden cough shattered the reverent silence, a sharp, choking sound that echoed like a gunshot in the dim room. All eyes snapped to the source, the sound a reminder that even the smallest disruption could ignite the furnace of debate. Orban seized the moment, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed louder than any roar. Imagine, dear President, Azerbaijan left to fend for itself in the 1920s, war, chaos, fragmentation. How long could independence last surrounded by ravenous neighbors? A year? 2? He let the question linger, the pause a blade poised above a heart. Aliyev's stare hardened, a flicker of doubt crossing his gaze. He inhaled deeply, the air thick with the metallic taste of anticipation, then steadied himself. He rose, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of a nation's memory. Your remarks forget the price we paid, he declared. Your Soviet factories, schools, hospitals were not charity. Our oil fed your war machines, our people bled for a regime that never regarded us as equals. He spoke of barrels of Baku oil fueling Red Army tanks, the lifeblood that turned the tide of World War II. The hall fell into a breathless quiet, every translator's pen hovering over paper, as if the very ink might dissolve. Orban's eyes narrowed, the cold light of a man who has seen empires rise and fall reflecting back. He leaned forward, hands resting on the table, fingers spaced like the gaps between continents he had just mapped with his words. Remember, he said, the Soviet era gave your nation schools, universities, theaters, even the palace you now occupy. He gestured to the grand hall, its marble columns, the polished floors, the very structure built under that regime. Aliyev's mouth twitched, a hint of a smile breaking through his stone-like composure, the tension finally snapping like a rope under strain. The final moments arrived without fanfare. Orban sat back, clasping his hands, his expression unreadable but his voice inexorably calm. History does not ask for permission, he concluded, it simply records the choices we make. Denial of the past erodes the future. The room exhaled as a single camera lens clicked, capturing the lingering silence that now felt louder than any applause. Aliyev remained still, his future words suspended, the weight of his nation's legacy pressing against his throat. What will he say next? The answer hangs, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. 5 minutes ago, unbelievable news rattled the world. Viktor Orban, at the summit, decisively confronted Ilham Aliyev in front of a packed audience. His words resonated with such power that silence enveloped the room, and cameras struggled to keep up with every moment. What did Orban say that left Aliyev speechless? Listen closely to this captivating narrative until the end, you will be astonished. Viktor Orban entered the hall differently than most politicians, who thrive on camera flashes. His steps were deliberate, heavy with the wisdom of someone well-versed in the storms of politics, exuding an aura that demanded attention without seeking it. Like iron filings drawn to an unseen magnet, people gravitated toward him. While he was not the tallest in the room, his presence felt as steady as a mountain, unyielding to the tides around him. He wore a tailored suit of deep, somber fabric, devoid of flashy elements, and his tie, a deep blue, commanded attention without shouting for it. His broad face, characterized by a strong jawline, bore the marks of experience rather than mere age. As he settled into his chair, the backrest yielded to his weight, yet it could not diminish his formidable stature. In his silence, Orban embodied more confidence than the longest of speeches could convey. Across from him sat Ilham Aliyev, claiming the space with the air of someone deeply familiar with power and unaccustomed to retreat. His suit, darker than protocol usually prescribes, accentuated his poised figure. His features were sharp and defined, resembling a chiseled statue, showing little emotion. But his eyes betrayed a hunter's intensity, taut and waiting for the right moment to pounce. The room, filled with leaders, was thick with protocol. The polished wooden panels and soft lighting cast a solemn atmosphere, where cameras flitted across faces, recording a moment that felt charged with tension. As duet began, Aliyev spoke confidently, crafting his words like solid stone arches, constructing a narrative about Azerbaijan's independence and the scars left by the Soviet Union. Then came his assertion of occupation, a word that dropped into the space like a blade, sharp and daring. Orban glanced slightly to the side, as if contemplating the shadows flickering from the table lamp. His lips quirked into a hint of a smile, not one of joy or agreement, but rather like a surgeon preparing for a precise cut. The atmosphere thickened with expectation, every camera held its breath, anticipating Orban's counterattack. Finally, he replied, "Mr. President," in a low, steady voice, imbued with the weight of experience rather than fervor. "When you call the Soviet Union an occupier, you overlook the foundation it laid for today's Azerbaijan." His words cascaded with a gentle authority, falling like stones placed carefully in a path. "I do not glorify the past. Hungary, too, has faced dark chapters." He paused, eyes fixed on Aliyev. "But I must ask you, would your country have the power, the recognition, even this flag without that history?" Tension built as Orban leaned in slightly, his tone earnest. The aid offered during those times laid the groundwork for the present. Aliyev remained tense, his grip tightening on the armrest, battling the urge to interject. Orban continued, "Gratitude toward the past is not a weakness, it is a strength." His words sliced through the air, casting shadows over Aliyev, whose facade began to crack. "Let us not forget those who choose to ignore past support fall victim to the illusion of independence." The room held its breath, Aliyev's face taut, betraying hints of doubt. Orban's voice maintained its calm as he articulated the harsh truths lurking in history, stating, "Without that union, would your nation have avoided being torn apart by rival states?" "History can be harsh, Mr. Aliyev." The stakes heightened with each word, the audience enthralled, knowing the tension unresolved. Orban leaned back, steady and calm, watching as Aliyev struggled to keep the facade of control intact. "History does not lie," he concluded, "and denying it leads only to a fragile future." As Aliyev drew a deep breath, his expression hardened. The glimmer of resolve ignited in his eyes, the spark of someone unwilling to remain silent, even on treacherous ground. "Mr. Orban, I respect your views, yet you must understand that for my people, the Soviet Union was more than just factories and schools. It was an era of diminished will, where decisions were made far from Baku." The room trembled with intensity as Aliyev continued, his voice steady yet burdened, "What good is infrastructure when it comes at such a steep price? Our resources served others while our populace often struggled." Stony silence enveloped the audience. Even the translators in their booths seemed to catch their breath. Orban, unfazed, took in Aliyev's words, his calm demeanor unbroken. Finally, he murmured, "You are correct, Mr. President. Decisions were often made outside your borders. But consider, those decisions ensured that your labor contributed to something greater, preventing your land from becoming a battlefield for foreign powers." Aliyev frowned. His inner conflict was evident, but Orban pressed on, elevating his argument. "Our shared history forms the backbone of what you now possess. Gratitude, while painful, does not erase the past, inferring it does is a disservice, not only to your people but future generations." The air thickened, anticipation crackling through the audience like electricity. "You may reject history, Aliyev, but remember that ingratitude leads only to the collapse of respect." Orban paused, giving his words weight, his final statement echoing powerfully in the silence. "Does your presidency not rely, at least partially, on the very foundation that you seek to deny?" The hall fell deathly silent. Tension held firm, hanging like a sword ready to drop. What would Aliyev's answer be? The stage was set for a confrontation that promised to unravel everything. Just moments before, the world had been shaken by an astonishing event. Viktor Orban, in front of the entire summit, decisively put Ilham Aliyev in his place. His words struck with such force that the room fell utterly silent, while cameras scrambled to capture every subtle movement. What did Orban say? What silenced Aliyev so completely? Stay with the story, what follows will leave you stunned. Orban entered the room unlike any typical politician. His steps were measured, deep with the weight of storms weathered long ago, carrying no need for grand gestures. Attention gravitated toward him like iron filings drawn to an unseen magnet. His stature was unremarkable, yet his presence felt like a steadfast cliff that centuries of crashing waves could not erode. His dark suit was matte and heavy, not a thread of luxury. The tie, a profound shade of blue, never demanded your gaze but held it firmly. His broad face, crowned by a strong chin, didn't show wrinkles, only the traces of lived experience. His brow furrowed slightly, hinting at a mind that lingered on thoughts longer than situations allowed. His eyes, calm, gray like a windless lake surface, reflected quiet strength. He sat slowly, sinking but not softening, as if every word he would utter was destined to carry the weight of stone. His silence spoke louder than speeches. Aliyev was already settled at his side. His presence screamed authority, the kind earned through years of power and unwillingness to yield. His darker-than-usual suit was sharply tailored, accentuating his lean frame. His face, sharply etched as if carved from stone, betrayed no emotion, except for tautness in his eyes. Like a hunter awaiting the perfect moment to strike. There was no warm greeting, only a brief nod, a silent declaration that this encounter was no handshake but the start of a strategic duel. The chamber breathed protocol. Pale wooden panels, softened lights, the long table's clean lines. Cameras slid over faces, but everyone understood, today wasn't about words, they would witness a collision. Aliyev opened softly at first. His voice was sure, crafting phrases like stone arches. One pillar, then the next, topped by a keystone. He spoke of Azerbaijan's independence, of memories overshadowed by the Soviet Union's legacy, not just schools and factories, but a heavy burden of lost freedom. The word occupation slipped out quietly, yet sharply. It landed on the table like a knife, daring someone to grasp it. Orban tilted his head slightly, as if contemplating the lamp's shadows over the table. His face did not flicker, but his lips curved into a subtle smile, neither friendly nor agreeing. It was the surgeon's smile before a cut, the quiet before brutal truth. The room froze. Some adjusted microphones, others feigned paper sorting. But everyone waited. Then Orban spoke. Mr. President, his voice was steady, low, hollow but firm like bedrock beneath waves. When you call the Soviet Union an occupier, you overlook one truth. It is on that very foundation that today's Azerbaijan stands. I do not idealize the past. Our own Hungarian history bears tragic scars. We once rose against Moscow, a dark chapter in our memory, a choice that cost us dearly. And I admit it was a grave mistake. He paused, and all eyes drew to him like grass toward sunlight. You speak of occupation, but had it not been for those years, when the Union built roads, universities, factories, when Baku became the oil heart of a vast nation, would you hold this power now? This flag? This state? None of it emerged from nothing. It was born through shared labor. Aliyev's fingers clenched the armrest tighter, ready to retort. But Orban cut the pause short. Gratitude toward the past is not weakness. It is strength. Those who forget their debt only gain an illusion of freedom. Illusions that shatter all too soon. I have seen this in neighbors who turned their backs on Russia. Now they face crises whose roots no one can deny. Orban's words, calm but sharp, cut through the air as if carving stone. Germany built its might on cooperation with Russia for decades. When gas and trade flowed freely, its industry thrived. And now? Break that union, and watch a crisis strike that will echo through generations. A throat cleared somewhere. The silence thickened. You still have time to reconsider, Mr. Aliyev. Orban raised a hand slightly, signaling he spoke not as an enemy but as one seasoned in hard truths. Think of the millions of Azerbaijanis living and working in Russia today. They build bridges, homes, families, futures. Destroy that bridge, and you harm not Moscow, but your own people. His voice sank into a near whisper. Yet it carried more weight than any rallying cry. Orban straightened, continuing. I have witnessed other nations turn away from Russia, thinking it made them stronger. They expected new alliances. Instead, they lost their industries, stability, respect. Their futures crumbled by their own hands. He never named these countries. The message was crystal clear. The room held its breath. Delegates exchanged glances, brows furrowed. No one spoke. Everyone understood the unspoken warning. Orban leaned forward, eyes steady on Aliyev. There is still another path. Do not repeat others' mistakes. Do not risk your people. The tension was electric. Aliyev's expression stiffened, lips pressed hard. Yet beneath that hardness flickered the first trace of doubt. He knew these words weren't just political blows, they struck at the pulse of his nation's future. What would he say next? Would he defend his memories of oppression? Or recognize the painful truth within Orban's plea? The room waited, caught between history and the uncertain future unfolding before their eyes. Earlier, the chamber fell into a heavy hush as Orban leaned forward, urging Aliyev to choose a different road and warning against repeating past errors. What if a single calm sentence could reshape the destiny of an entire nation? The air smelled faintly of polished wood and recycled coolness, the faint buzz of the climate system humming like a distant hive. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their shoulders tightening, while the cameras, usually hungry for movement, seemed frozen in anticipation. You must think beyond the comfort of your own seat, beyond the brief glare of spotlights. Millions of Azerbaijani citizens have placed their hopes in your hands, trusting you to steer their collective future. Aliyev's eyes hardened, his jaw clenched, a flicker of doubt pierced that steely stare. He sensed Orban's words striking not merely at policy, but at the very heart of his people. Orban finished with measured calm, each phrase landing like a sealed stamp. History does not forgive ingratitude, it strips away the foundations of those who neglect their past. Yet, while the chance still glimmers, you can decide, build together or crumble alone. The room settled into an almost palpable silence. Even the ever-watchful lenses of the cameras seemed to pause, as if straining to catch the breath between the two leaders. Aliyev's fingers trembled lightly on the tabletop, a subtle tremor that announced the impact of the moment. Orban reclined, hands crossed over his chest, his face an expression of quiet resolve rather than triumph. The stillness was punctuated only by the soft rustle of paper brushed unintentionally by a nervous hand, and the low whir of the air-conditioning units. A delegate from Central Asia gave a barely perceptible nod, his eyes reflecting a hidden satisfaction. Across the table, a Middle Eastern minister adjusted his glasses with a sharp motion, his tension barely contained, his gaze fixed on Aliyev as if awaiting an impossible answer. In that suspended breath, the echo of Orban's words reverberated through the hall, reaching the farthest corners, stirring a silent chorus among the gathered representatives. Who will heed the warning, and who will ignore the warning, letting the silence become a prelude to upheaval? The answer lingered, waiting to surface. Only minutes earlier, an incredible event unfolded that no one dared voice aloud before. At one end of the long table, a Middle Eastern minister adjusted his glasses with a sudden, sharp movement, almost a tremor revealing hidden tension. His gaze fixated on Aliyev, as if the man had just been struck in the chest and was now expected to deliver an impossible response that simply did not exist. Even usually detached delegates around the room stirred, their composure slipping. One discreetly scribbled into a notebook while another crossed his arms and leaned forward, trying to catch every word. This gathering no longer felt like a routine diplomatic forum, it had transformed into a battleground where history and destiny clashed simultaneously. Meanwhile, Aliyev sat motionless. His face was carved from stone, eyes heavy with exhaustion. It was as if he bore a burden growing heavier with each passing second. His fingers gripped the armrest so tightly that the knuckles blanched white. Orban noticed but remained unmoved. His calm was a fortress, rising above any verbal assault. He held himself like a stern teacher who had already issued the warning and now waited for the student's realization to dawn. Even the interpreters, usually neutral and detached, betrayed subtle shifts in tone. Their voices gained a quiet reverence, as though they themselves respected the weight of Orban's words. The hall froze in that silence. Every listener understood, these were not just counterpoints in a political duel but a lesson carved in stone. One undeniable truth silenced a dozen excuses. Aliyev tried to lift his eyes but met Orban's unyielding gaze, quickly lowering them again to his notes. His silence screamed louder than any rebuttal could. Without fanfare, a break was called, soft and deliberate. The murmurs of footsteps returned, the clinking of teacups, the crisp snap of closing folders. Yet beneath these familiar sounds, tension hung thick in the air, impossible to mask. Delegates drifted into small groups, whispering urgently or speaking too fast, desperate to capture the fleeting thoughts while they still burned fresh. Each voice carried the same unspoken truth: they had just witnessed a moment destined to echo for months. "Did you see how he shut him down?" whispered a diplomat from Central Asia to his colleague, eyes wide with astonishment. A stunning moment unfolded in a grand hall where leaders from around the world gathered. Viktor Orban sat poised, exuding a steady strength that captivated everyone present. As he entered, there was an unspoken gravity in his presence, a quiet dominance that commanded attention without demanding it. Unlike the usual spectacle of politicians strutting for the cameras, Orban's slow, deliberate pace drew the spotlight naturally, as if he were an ancient oak standing firm against the howling winds of change. His dark suit absorbed the light, and the deep blue tie caught the eye without shouting for attention. But it was his face, broad and unyielding, that told the true story. Lines etched not by age, but by the weight of experience and thought, framed his serious brow, while calm gray eyes mirrored a tranquil lake, seemingly untouched by the surrounding turmoil. He settled into his chair with purpose, as though awaiting the most profound truth to emerge from his lips. Opposite him, Ilham Aliyev occupied his space with the confidence of one who understands power but is unaccustomed to retreat. His darker suit hugged his form, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face, which displayed no emotional breach, yet his eyes betrayed an undertone of tension, a hunter's anticipation for the right moment to assert his will. The two leaders met in a curt nod, a tacit acknowledgement before the silence of the room thickened like a storm cloud before the rain. The discussions began softly, with Aliyev speaking about Azerbaijan's independence, referencing the shadows of a past that still lingered. His words flowed, each point meticulously crafted, much like arches built upon one another for strength. But when the term occupation slipped into the conversation, it cut through the stillness, demanding attention. Orban regarded Aliyev, the slight tilt of his head speaking volumes. A ghost of a smile hinted at the gravity to come, the preparatory calm before the storm. Then, like thunder breaking the silence, Orban responded. "Mr. President," he began, his voice steady and low, carrying the weight of history. "When you speak of the Soviet Union as an occupier, do you not recognize it as a foundation upon which today's republic stands?" He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he forged his argument with hard facts, laying them down like stones on a path. Past mistakes were acknowledged, shared experiences of bygone struggles united them in a way words could not express. As murmurs of shock rippled through the delegates, Aliyev stiffened. What Orban asserted was not mere rhetoric, it was a challenge. A truth that stung like a fresh wound. Orban continued, painting a picture of cooperation that led to prosperity. The roads, the universities, the very fabric of your state was built on shared efforts, not mere suffering. If you dismiss this history, do you not risk losing what you hold dear? The atmosphere crackled with tension. Aliyev's fingers gripped the armrest, a silent struggle against the tide of truth that Orban unleashed. He restrained his urge to refute it, the weight of history pressing down on him. In that instant, Aliyev realized this was no ordinary debate, it was a confrontation of legacies. Mr. Orban, Aliyev finally spoke, taking a deep breath to mask his unease. Your perspective overlooks the pain that came with it. Our sovereignty was sacrificed at the altar of convenience. The air thickened, heavy with the implications of his words, as the room held its collective breath. Orban leaned forward, his voice calm yet firm, like a judge delivering a verdict. And what would that sacrifice leave behind? your power, your identity? If not for the tumultuous past, would Azerbaijan even exist today? Silence enveloped the hall, a tangible tension echoing off the walls. The question hung in the air, stirring a mixture of admiration and unease among the observers. Who would yield in this intellectual clash? Some reporters scribbled quickly, intoxicated by the high drama unfolding. It was clear to all, they had just witnessed a scene that would dominate discussions for months to come. A Central Asian diplomat leaned close to his colleague, whispering in awe, "Did you see how he put him in his place?" But among the flurry of thoughts and whispered comments, the tension brewed. Aliyev stepped away, his face impassive yet reflecting a turbulent storm within. As he retreated to his negotiation room, a frisson of uncertainty coursed through him. Could he withstand the weight of these ideas? Meanwhile, Orban, surrounded by supporters, exhibited an aura of monumental composure. With each exchange and handshake, he emanated a quiet confidence, leaving all to ponder the effectiveness of his calculated discourse. As the session resumed, the atmosphere thickened. Transformed, suddenly alive and filled with unspoken challenges. It would be a meeting forever etched in history, but who would emerge victorious remains a question for another day, leaving everyone poised on the edge of anticipation. Just moments ago, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The previous speaker had answered questions calmly, his succinct responses carrying a weight that felt monumental. Everyone knew the tone had changed. When the session resumed, the air was thick, not empty, but charged, as if each molecule held the echo of the intense exchange that had just passed. Delegates sat quietly in their seats, eyes cast downward or locked in cautious calculation, as if filtering every thought through the powerful words just spoken. At the center, he sat, hands folded steadily on the table, head slightly bowed forward. He didn't rush to speak, but the room waited, tension mounting with every passing second, drawn to the calm before the storm. His silence spoke louder than any speech could. Then, when finally he broke it, the room fell utterly still. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, voice steady and low, layered with the confidence of one who speaks not for applause but for truth. "We are here to build the future, but no future can stand without remembering the past." A pause. His gaze swept across the assembly. A few deputies nodded almost imperceptibly, as if his words struck a chord deep within their hearts. "Hungary has known hardship as well," he continued. "We rebelled, we faltered, we paid dearly. But let me be clear, to reject memory, to turn ungrateful eyes on those who supported us through our darkest times, is to invite disaster." His tone dropped further, each word carrying the weight of stones laid down to build a bridge. "The Soviet Union gave our peoples industry, education, culture, roads, hospitals. Yes. There were mistakes, but without this legacy, many of us wouldn't be sitting here today. We cannot forget those who built, who sacrificed, and who stood by us." The silence that followed was so profound one could hear a pen click somewhere across the room. No eyes wavered. He cast a narrow glance toward the president across the table, a subtle yet unmistakable gesture. The message was clear, these words were pointed, directed. "If we want to preserve a future for our children," he concluded, "we must honor the past. This is not weakness. It is the foundation of our strength." No applause broke the quiet, only a silence so heavy it felt like an unspoken pact, a reluctant nod to truth. This stillness was louder than any cheer. It meant agreement, recognition, even respect. But beneath it all lay a tension as palpable as a held breath, because respect was just one piece in a larger, unfolding battle. What would come next? Would this calm embrace of history sway those who remembered it differently? The room waited, held captive, unsure whether this was the end or merely the turning point. Moments ago, the world was rocked by astonishing news. Viktor Orban made a statement that left Ilham Aliyev dumbfounded during a summit, silencing the entire room. His words were so powerful that they echoed as if challenging history itself. What did Orban say that caused Aliyev to go quiet? Listen closely, and prepare to be amazed. Viktor Orban walked into the hall with a deliberate grace that set him apart from the usual political bravado. His steps were slow yet carried the weight of someone who has weathered many storms. He didn't chase attention, it gathered around him like iron filings drawn to a magnet. He was not tall, but there was something unwavering about his presence, like a cliff facing relentless waves for centuries. His dark suit had a serious matte texture, no hint of luxury. The deep blue tie caught the eye without demanding it, symbolizing all that he carried. His wide face, marked not by wrinkles but by lines of experience, told a story of thoughtful contemplation. As he settled into his chair, it was clear that whatever he said would carry immense significance. Ilham Aliyev was already seated, confidently occupying space. His darker suit fitted him well, emphasizing his tall frame. While his expression was stern, his eyes revealed a hunter's tension, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Their silent acknowledgement was not a greeting but a prelude to a strategic duel. The room, filled with leaders, thrummed with formality, the polished wood panels, dimmed lights, and straight lines of the long table setting a stark backdrop. Aliyev spoke first, outlining Azerbaijan's independence and the weight of history. His words flowed like a stone arch, strong and intentional. Yet, when he mentioned occupation, each syllable sliced the air. Orban, calmly absorbing the tension, tilted his head slightly as if pondering the shadows cast by the table lamp. His lips barely moved in a subtle smirk devoid of joy or agreement. It was the smile of a surgeon preparing to make a critical incision, ensuring that truth would follow. The atmosphere thickened as Orban lifted the conversation. "Mr. President," he began, his voice steady and gravely serious, carrying the weight of centuries. "When you label the Soviet Union as an occupier, you neglect to acknowledge the foundational elements it provided for today's Azerbaijan." The murmurs in the room hushed as Orban continued, his conviction unfurling like sails on a ship. Yes, Hungary faced its own tragedies in the past, struggling against Moscow, but was it a route that brought us to light? We lost lives and years, arriving at nothing beneficial. A sudden murmur rippled through the delegates. Could history teach us, or did we merely repeat old mistakes? Aliyev tightened his grip on the armrest, feeling the undercurrent of truth in Orban's rhetoric. The Hungarian leader was not merely defending the past but pointing towards a hidden strength in recognition. Think of the millions of Azerbaijanis thriving in Russia today, Orban urged, leaning forward slightly. His words resonated, suspended in the air, inviting imminent reflection. Aliyev inhaled sharply but found himself trapped in a maze of reasoning. Orban's assertion came with the weight of undeniable facts. Without those years, would Azerbaijan wield the freedom it claims today? The silence stretched. Each second weighed heavily, and Aliyev understood the implications of that silence, the truth lurking just beneath the surface. As the session drew to a close, a familiar buzz filled the air, delegates rushing to shake hands and smile for cameras. But beneath the platitudes lay the stark reality. Orban's calm demeanor suggested that winning was never his goal, rather, he highlighted a truth everyone needed to hear. Aliyev stood, his earlier confidence cracking under the pressure of truth. His face remained stoic, but he walked past the cameras, avoiding eye contact, his steps betraying him with their tension. In the aftermath, whispers spread through the corridors. Orban's words about gratitude were no longer mere diplomacy, they had transformed into a lesson that echoed long after he had stepped away from the podium. The warmth of the sun bathed Orban as he exited the building, his face alight with the soft glow of contentment. He had said what needed to be said and was ready to move on. For the delegates, this wasn't just a diplomatic exchange, it was a lesson in memory. A revelation that gratitude isn't a sign of weakness but a form of power, and that turning away from one's past risks forfeiting the future. And so, the silence that followed Orban's final words spoke louder than applause, embodying acknowledgement, respect, and a hard-won truth: those who forget history doom themselves to repeat it. What do you think? How significant is the role of gratitude toward the past in shaping the politics of our future? Just moments ago, the world witnessed a stunning diplomatic showdown. Viktor Orban, standing confidently before a packed summit, delivered words so powerful they silenced the room and left cameras scrambling to capture every nuance. What did Orban say that left Ilham Aliyev speechless? What secret truth did he unveil that shifted the entire atmosphere? Listen closely to the unfolding story, you won't believe the revelation that changed everything. Orban entered not with the swagger of a typical politician chasing the spotlight but with slow, deliberate steps, carrying the weight of experience from storms weathered for decades. His presence drew attention like iron filings to a hidden magnet. Not tall, yet unshakable as an ancient cliff crashing against relentless waves.